I came home on a Thursday after 11 hours on my feet to find my husband's mother standing in my kitchen reorganizing my pantry. Not visiting, reorganizing. She had pulled everything off the second shelf. The jars I had arranged by size, the spices I kept in a specific order because I actually cook and I actually know where things are. And she was grouping them by color. By color. I stood in the doorway with my work bag still on my shoulder and watched her move my turmeric next to my paprika. Because they were both orange and I thought, very clearly, this is not the first time. This is just the first time. This is just the first time I am seeing it from the outside. I smiled. I said hi. I said something about traffic. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed with my shoes still on and stared at the wall for a moment. My name is Nora. I'm 31 years old, and until about 14 months ago, I had a life I had built exactly the way I wanted it. I was a project manager at a mid-sized architecture firm in Nashville, a job I'd worked my way into over 6 years, starting as a junior coordinator straight out of college and learning the whole structure of it from the ground up. I owned a 2-bedroom house in East Nashville that I bought at 28 on my own. My credit, my down payment, my mortgage. After 2 years of putting away money with the specific, quiet discipline of someone who knows what she wants and is prepared to wait for it. The house had original hardwood floors and a deep porch and a kitchen with enough counter space that cooking in it felt like a pleasure rather than a negotiation. I had painted every room myself over a long weekend with my college roommate's help and a Spotify playlist that we still talk about. I had met my husband at a work event. He was a contractor, one of the firms we partnered with regularly, and he had the kind of steady, unhurried confidence I'd always found more attractive than charm. We dated for a year. We got engaged. We got married at a vineyard outside of Franklin with 60 people lent wildflowers and his grandmother crying in the front row, which made me cry too. His family was warm and large and had been generous with me from the beginning. His mother, who I will call my mother-in-law because that is what she is, had welcomed me with the kind of open-armed enthusiasm that felt genuinely kind. His father was quieter but smiled at everything I said. He had a younger sister who texted me memes. I had thought, walking into all of that warmth, that I was gaining something. What I hadn't understood, what I came to understand only slowly, in the way you understand that a sweater has gotten too tight, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small constrictions, was that his family's warmth did not come with walls. They did not knock. They did not call ahead. Or when they did, it was the kind of call that was really a statement. We're thinking of stopping by this weekend. Not a question, a forecast. The first time his mother came over without notice, I had been working from home. I came downstairs in an old college t-shirt at 10 in the morning to find her at my front door with a casserole and an opinion about my throw pillows. She had a key. He had given her a key without telling me, which is its own story, but not the one I want to tell right now. I brought it up that evening gently. He said she was just being helpful. I said I understood that, and also could we please discuss the key situation. He looked at me with the specific expression of a man who had never had to think about this before. The look of someone who has lived inside a family's open-door policy so long that the concept of a closed door reads as hostility. He said he'd talk to her. I don't know if he did. The visits kept coming. By the time I got home on that Thursday to find her color-coding my spices, we had been married 11 months. In those 11 months, his mother had been in my house without advance notice 14 times. I know the number because I had started writing them down, not out of spite, but out of the particular self-protective instinct of a woman who has been told she is overreacting enough times that she has started keeping receipts. 14 times, twice while I was traveling for work, which meant she had let herself in with that key to a house that was mine and sat in it alone. Once she had done a load of laundry. She told me later proudly that she had folded everything and put it away. My husband thought this was an act of love. I thought about what it meant that she had handled my clothes, sorted my things, moved through the rooms of my house without me, and filed it under love. The Thursday pantry situation was the end of an already long week. I had been managing a project that was 3 weeks behind schedule due to a subcontractor issue that wasn't my fault but was absolutely my problem. I had spent the last 2 days on the phone with people who were unhappy and needed me to be calm, which I had been, professionally and competently, because that is what the job requires. I had 45 minutes of decompression in the car on the way home, and I had needed all of it. I sat on the bed for a few minutes. I could hear her in the kitchen. The sound of cabinet doors, the soft thud of jars being relocated. My husband was not home yet. It was 4:30. She had presumably let herself in with the key at some point in the afternoon and decided the pantry needed addressing. I changed out of my work clothes. I went back downstairs. She was delighted to see me, genuinely, I think, in the way she always was, warm and immediate and completely unaware of, or unconcerned by, the fact that her presence in my kitchen at 4:30 on a Thursday was something I had not agreed to. She told me about a sale at the grocery store. She told me my cumin was expired. She asked if we were free Saturday. I said I'd have to check. I made myself coffee. I stood at my own kitchen counter and drank it while she explained her organizational system to me. When my husband got home at 6, he was happy to see her. Of course he was. She was his mother, and he loved her, and she had reorganized our pantry and started a pot of soup, which was on the stove when he walked in. He hugged her and looked over at me with an expression that said, "Isn't this nice?" And I looked back at him with an expression that I hope communicated clearly that we were going to talk about this later. We did not talk about it until after she left at 8:30, which was its own small test of my patience, sitting through dinner in my dining room, at my table, eating soup I hadn't made, in a version of my own home that had been quietly rearranged while I was at work. When she left, I washed the dishes. He came and stood in the kitchen doorway. "I know," he said, before I had said anything. "Do you?" I said, before I had said anything. "Do you?" I said. She was just trying to help. I turned off the water. I dried my hands. I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "I need you to hear what I'm about to say, not as a complaint but as a fact. I came home today after one of the hardest weeks I've had this quarter. Your mother was in our house. I did not know she was coming. She was reorganizing things that did not need reorganizing. I spent 2 hours in my own home performing gratitude for something I did not ask for." He was quiet. "That's not a one-time thing," I said. "That's every few weeks. And I need it to stop." He said he would talk to her. He said that every time. I want to be fair about what came next, because fairness matters to me, and because the easy version of this story, where he was the villain and she was the villain and I was simply wronged, is not the true version. The true version is more uncomfortable. He wasn't a bad husband. He was an unexamined one. He had grown up in a family where his mother's access to every part of his life had been total and unquestioned, where love was expressed through physical presence and practical intervention, where showing up was the language of care. He did not understand on a fundamental level that a different kind of person might not speak that language, might not want to, might in fact find the constant presence not loving but exhausting. I had told him this. In the 11 months we'd been married, I had told him 6 separate times in 6 separate conversations, each one slightly more direct than the last. He had listened each time. He had agreed each time. Nothing had changed. The Saturday after the pantry incident, his sister came over in the afternoon. She texted on the way, which was progress, technically, except the text said, "Be there in 20, which is notification, not a question. She brought her boyfriend. They stayed for 4 hours. My husband was delighted. I made snacks and smiled and counted the minutes. That evening, after they left, I did something I had not done before. I did not bring it up with my husband. I sat with it instead. I let myself think the thing I had been refusing to think, which was, this is not going to change, not because he is malicious, but because he does not experience this as a problem, and he will not solve a problem he cannot feel. That thought sat in me for about a week. I went to work. I came home. I was pleasant. I was present. I did not pick a fight, but I also did not apologize, which I realized only afterward had become a habit. Apologizing for needing things, softening my needs until they disappeared, making it easier for everyone except myself. I called my friend Jade on a Tuesday night. Jade and I had been close since our mid-20s, and she had a quality I have always valued in people, which is that she tells you the true thing, not the comfortable one. I told her everything, the whole 11 months of it, the key, the 14 visits, the pantry, the 6 conversations that had produced zero change. She listened. Then she said, "What do you actually want?" I didn't answer right away. She said, "Not what do you actually want." I didn't answer right away. She said, "Not what do you want him to do?" "What do you want?" I said. "I want to come home to my own house. I want to know that when I put my key in the lock, I know what's on the other side. I want to not have to manage my own home like it's a shared resource I have partial rights to." Jade said, "Okay, then we need to talk about what that looks like." What it looked like, I decided over the following 2 weeks, was a real conversation. Not a complaint, not another gentle nudge. A real conversation with actual stakes, where I said what I needed clearly and asked him to tell me honestly whether he was willing to give it. I asked for that conversation on a Sunday morning. We sat at the kitchen table, and I said what I'd been holding. I said that I loved him and that I wanted our marriage to work. I said that I needed our home to be mine in the actual practical sense. That I needed consent to who was in it. That I needed the key situation addressed. That I needed to be treated as a full partner in decisions about our shared space. I said I had raised this 6 times and nothing had changed. I said I needed to know whether this was a communication problem or a values problem, because the solutions were very different. He listened. He reached across the table. He said, "I hear you." He said he was sorry. He said he would handle the key and he would talk to his family about calling ahead, really talk to them this time. I wanted to believe him. I tried to. The key was not addressed that week. Or the next. 3 weeks after our Sunday conversation, I came home on a Wednesday afternoon to find his parents both in our living room. His father on the couch, his mother in the armchair I had picked out, the one with the green velvet that I had agonized over at the furniture store for 45 minutes because I wanted it to be right. They had let themselves in. My husband wasn't home yet. They had been there, alone in my house, long enough that his mother had put on a pot of coffee using the coffee I bought. They looked up when I came in with the particular ease of people who have never had to consider whether their presence might be inconvenient. "Hi, sweetheart," his mother said. I said hi. I put my bag down. I said I needed to make a call and went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ceiling and thought, there it is. Not with anger. That was the thing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was past anger into something clearer and colder. The specific clarity of a person who has been given information and finally knows what to do with it. I called my husband. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Your parents are in our house." He said, "I know." He'd meant to text me. He was on his way home. I said, "Okay." I hung up. I went back out and made conversation for 40 minutes until he got home, and I was perfectly pleasant, and I counted every minute. That night, after his parents left, we sat at the kitchen table again. Same chairs. Different quality of air. I said, "The key is still out there." He said he'd been meaning to deal with it. I said, "I need you to hear me say this one time, clearly, without softening it. I have asked you for one specific, practical thing 6 times in 11 months. You have agreed 6 times. Nothing has happened. Today I came home to find your parents in our house alone. I did not know they were coming. I did not agree to this. My house was accessed without my permission." He said it wasn't that serious. They were family. I said, "I know they are. That's not the point. The point is that I live here and I have told you what I need, and you have consistently decided that what your family wants matters more. I'm not asking you to choose between me and them. I'm asking you to treat me like a partner. Those are different asks." He said, "I don't know why you can't just be more flexible." There it was. Not "I'm sorry, I'll fix it." Not "I understand, I've been wrong." Just, "Why can't you be more flexible?" Which was not a response to what I had said. It was a redirection, a way of making my needs into my flaw. I stood up. I said, "I'm going to take a few days to think." He looked surprised. He said, Think about what? I said, what I need this to look like going forward. And then I went to the bedroom, and I called Jade and I told her what he had said, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Do you want to come stay here for a few days?" I said I needed to think first. But I wrote everything down that night. Every conversation, every date, every incident. I wrote it carefully, not emotionally, the way I write project timelines at work. Facts and dates and outcomes. By the time I finished, I had 3 full pages. I made an appointment with a family attorney the following week. I had found her through a colleague who had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier and described her as thorough and direct, and not someone who wasted time. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had the kind of focused, unhurried attention that made me feel immediately like I was in competent hands. She reviewed what I brought her, the deed in my name, the mortgage documentation, records of my down payment. The house had been mine before the marriage. We had commingled some finances after the wedding, a joint account for shared expenses, but nothing that significantly complicated the picture. She was clear and specific about what my position was. She said, "You are in a strong position." She said, "The question is what you want to do with it." I said, "I know what I want. I've been trying to talk myself out of it for 3 months." She said, "Then let's talk about next steps." I gave it another 2 weeks after that. Not because I was uncertain, but because I have a habit of needing to be sure that my certainty is real and not reactive, a quality I have had my whole life that sometimes frustrates people who want me to move faster. I wanted to know that when I made this decision, I was making it from a steady place, not a hurt one. During those 2 weeks, his mother called me. She had heard, she said, that things had been tense. She was worried about us. She said she hoped she hadn't done anything to cause problems. Her voice was warm, as it always was, but there was something underneath the warmth, a note of something careful, something that had been briefed. My husband had talked to her. She was doing damage control on his behalf, without knowing that's what it was. I told her I appreciated her calling. I told her that what was happening between my husband and me was between us, and that I didn't think getting her involved would help either of us. She said she understood. She said she just wanted us to be happy. I said, "I know." "Thank you for calling." After I hung up, I sat for a long moment. He had called his mother before he had come back to me. Before another conversation, before another attempt at repair, he had gone sideways to his family to manage the situation through them. Just like that, the decision I had been turning over became entirely simple. I told to him on a Friday evening. I had made sure we would not be interrupted. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, and I told him that I had thought carefully about our marriage and what I needed from it, and that I didn't believe we were able to give each other what we needed. I told him that the house was mine, legally and outright, and that I was asking him to move out. I said I wanted to handle it with as much dignity as we could manage. I said I had already spoken to an attorney and understood our options. He was very still. When I finished, he said, "Is this because of the key?" I said, "It's because of everything the key represents. You have not been able to treat me as an equal partner in our own home. I have told you clearly what I need, more than once, and each time you've agreed and nothing has changed. I can't keep having the same conversation and expecting a different result." He said, "I've been trying." I said, "I know, I think you have, but trying and changing are different things, and I needed the second one." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Where am I supposed to go?" I said his parents had a house with a guest room. His sister had a couch. He had options. I said I would give him 2 weeks to make arrangements. He left in 12 days. His mother came to help him pack, which I expected. She looked at me when she arrived with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Not hostility. Something more complicated. Maybe the beginning of understanding. I gave them the space to do what they needed and took myself out for coffee and came back when the truck was gone. The house was very quiet after that. The first morning I woke up alone. I lay in bed and waited for the sadness to arrive. It did arrive. I want to be honest about that. I had loved him in the way you love someone who is good in many ways and simply insufficient in the one way that turns out to matter most. I missed the version of the marriage I had wanted it to be. I missed the way he laughed at his own jokes and always remembered how I took my coffee and was genuinely kind about small things in a way that had made me believe the big things would work themselves out too. They didn't. That's the honest end of that. But underneath the sadness in the first morning and the second and the morning after that, something else was there. Something I recognized from before he had moved in. The particular quality of silence in my own house. The way the kitchen looked when nothing had been moved. The knowledge, clean and simple, that whoever came to my door today had been invited by me. I had not realized how much of my energy had been spent on the performance of being fine with things I was not fine with until the performance was over. Jade came for dinner 2 weeks after he moved out. She brought wine and didn't comment on the fact that the pantry was back in the order I preferred. My dad drove up from Chattanooga the following weekend and fixed a porch board that had been loose since I bought the house, and we sat outside in the late afternoon with iced tea, and he said, "You did the right thing," in the specific, quiet way of a man who says things once and means them completely. The legal process took about 3 months. We had a limited amount to divide. We agreed on the joint account split without much difficulty, and everything else was straightforward. My attorney had been right. The position was clear. I signed the final paperwork on a Thursday morning in her office and walked out into a spring day that was doing its best. The light, high and clean. The kind of Nashville weather that makes you feel like the city is trying to apologize for February. I drove home. I parked in my driveway. I sat in the car for a minute just to feel it, the return. When I walked into my house, it was exactly as I had left it. The hardwood floors, the white kitchen, the green velvet armchair that I had agonized over and chosen correctly as it turned out. The pantry in the order, I kept it. The key that opened the door was mine, and there was now only one copy of it in my hand, which was where it had always belonged. I am not going to tell you that everything was easy after that. Some days the quiet felt like absence, not peace, and I had to make a choice about which way to hold it. Some evenings I cooked dinner for one and was fine, and some evenings I cooked dinner for one and had a glass of wine on the porch and thought about compatibility and what it cost to discover it missing too late. But I go to work and I come home and the house is mine in the full and actual sense of that word. My mornings are unscheduled. My weekends are mine to offer, not to lose. When someone is in my house, it is because I said yes, specifically knowing what I was agreeing to. My mother-in-law texted me once, about 6 weeks after everything was finalized. She said she was sorry things had ended the way they did. She said she hoped I was well. I believe she meant it. I texted back that I appreciated it, that I hoped the same for her, that I held nothing against her personally. Then I put the phone down and made coffee in my kitchen, which was mine, and stood at the window and looked out at the street. The porch board was fixed. The hardwood floors were the same. The light through the kitchen windows in the morning was the thing I had bought this house for in the first place. Before any of this, back when it was just mine. It's mine again. I didn't know how much I had drifted from myself until I stopped drifting. The realignment, when it came, was not dramatic. It was just a return. To the woman who had saved for 2 years for a down payment. Who had painted her own walls. Who knew where she kept her spices and why, and was the only person who needed to. I have been that woman again for 5 months now. I am not in a hurry to be anything else. I've thought a lot about what this whole thing actually cost me and what it gave back. Not in a dramatic way, not in the way people sometimes talk about hard endings, like they were lightning strikes that changed everything in an instant. It wasn't like that. It was slow and quiet, and the cost was mostly invisible until I added it up. The energy spent performing gratitude, the conversations that went nowhere, the version of myself I kept making smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. That accumulation is real. It has weight, and one of the things I understand now that I didn't fully understand before is that it doesn't disappear on its own. You either name it and deal with it, or you keep paying it indefinitely. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened between me and my husband was the result of one bad decision or one bad moment. It was the result of a pattern, and patterns are built choice by choice, day by day, in the small, ordinary moments that don't feel significant until you look back at them from a distance. Every time I softened what I needed, every time I accepted I'll talk to them as a substitute for actual change, every time I made it easier for everyone except myself, I was participating in the pattern too. That's not self-blame. That's just the honest version of how these things work. We were both building something together, and what we built turned out not to be what either of us needed. The thing about integrity. And I mean that word in the structural sense. The way a building has integrity when everything is load-bearing what it's supposed to load-bear is that it requires you to be honest about the gap between what you say you need and what you actually accept. I had been living in that gap for almost a year, saying I needed to be treated as a partner and then accepting less than that over and over because it was easier than the alternative. That gap, held open long enough, becomes the shape of your life. And one day you look up and realize that the life you're living doesn't match the person you actually are. Jade asked me, early on, what I actually wanted. Not what I wanted him to do. What I wanted. That question sounds simple. It isn't. Most of us spend a lot of time translating our own needs into other people's actions. If he would just do this, if she would just understand that when the truer, harder question is, what does the life I actually want look like and am I living it? I wasn't. I had all the outward markers of the life I built. The house, the career, the carefully chosen armchair. And I had quietly handed over the right to occupy it fully. What I have now is not a perfect life. It's a real one. Some evenings are genuinely lonely. Some mornings are better than others. But when I come home, the house is mine in the full and actual meaning of that word. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. Everything else, the good mornings, the easy evenings, the particular piece of a Saturday with no obligations that aren't mine to choose, grows from that one real thing. Nora made 6 attempts to fix something that required 2 people to fix it. She brought patience and clarity, and more than enough good faith. What she finally understood is that you cannot want someone's growth more than they want it for themselves. When that moment came, she didn't collapse into it. She stood up, named what was true, and chose herself without apology. That's not hardness. That's the quietest, most difficult kind of courage there is.